No, first of all, I want to say hi. I asked, could I speak to you all? I just wanted to say hi. And it was some discussion the last time we was together because I spoke to somebody down at the landing, and I couldn't speak to the rest of. Hello, everybody. So thank you. And let me tell you something. I want to thank you all for your support, my supporters, the prayers, and I'm really happy that I can now say at least thank the community for standing by me. I am innocent, and my attorney will say anything else other than that.
Well, he did a good job the other day when you were still not sure if you were allowed to speak or not.
No, he said, the judge said don't speak, and I just felt like I need to follow his rules.
And now, though, that you're free to speak a little more freely, how are you feeling about this trial?
Did you hear what he said? He said I can speak, but he wouldn't advise it. So I want to see what my attorney have to say.
Right. She just wanted to make that general statement, and so that's all as far as any statements that the Congresswoman's going to make today.
You talked about the juror contacts. A little bit unusual that presumably two separate jurors possibly making these contacts?
Yes. I think what you saw up there today, and first and foremost, let me say these are difficult issues for lawyers to deal with, and I know difficult issues for the judge to deal with. I know that Judge Corrigan is striving, like he always does, to be very fair and to balance a lot of competing interests, the right of people to have a fair trial, to have some finality with our verdicts, but also transparency. Is a judge who's very, very committed to the idea of balancing all those interests and trying to reach the right result.
There were so many people who were here for what ended up being 3 weeks. I've never seen a sort of a crowd watch a trial like that, and this
I
one was
thought it should have been more.
Well, and let me say this, the reason who came to the trial, it's all the good things that she's done.
Ms. Brown, what has life been like for you since those verdicts were read?
Well, let me say, life has been very busy, as usual. The process isn't over. As I'm sure all of you know who follow trials, there's the verdict, their post-trial motions, and their sentencing. So life, remarkably, is a lot like it was beforehand, meeting with me, working, but also doing the normal routine things of the day, spending time with her mother, spending time with family and friends, and going to church.
And Mr. Simmons, I do appreciate your response, but I would like to hear from the Congresswoman as well.
Well, I spent time with my mother during Mother's Day. I had a wonderful Mother's Day. Church, and do what you do with your mother on Mother's Day. Took her to dinner. So no, everything is normal, as normal as it can be. This last 15 months has been very difficult. I don't know what part you don't understand. It's been a very difficult time in my life, and I'm looking forward, as my pastor says, to the next phase of my life. This is not the end.
Congresswoman, I've known you for many years. I've never seen you that dejected after that verdict was read when you walked out. I mean, can you tell us what you were feeling then at that time? And now you seem a total change. Even your demeanor seems totally different today. What happened over the weekend?
I just know that the Lord have not left me yet. He's still working with me, and evidently he wanted, I'm going through the fire, but it's not over.
What's your take on the Juror 13's dismissal? Do you think that was fair?
Let me say this. One of the things that you noticed, you talked about the dejected mood and perhaps the change. I think clearly you see that there's something that's gone on with the jury. As an officer of the court, I can't say that I know what it is, but sometimes when you feel that you have a fertile ground for a new trial, that can lift your spirits. So just know that we're pursuing every avenue that we can, because ultimately, even more important than the verdict is to make sure that the verdict is reached in the appropriate and fair way.
Do you have evidence to believe that there are two different jurors who have reached out, one to you and a different to the court, or do you believe they're the same?
Well, I think that's pretty clear from the hearing today that there was a juror that reached out to us, and that there was a separate, different juror who reached out to the court via the text message, so at least two. And it's also my understanding that some members of the media have had jurors reach out to you as well.
What do you think happened?
Well, put it to you this way. I think the important thing is to first find out what happened. We can guess and we can speculate, but I think that when you have this type of juror activity, it's enough to raise a concern that I, exercising my due diligence, need to pursue all avenues and try to discover what happened.
You seem to believe that Juror 13 should not have been dismissed.
Absolutely, and I think when you have a chance to read the transcript, you'll see that. We objected to the dismissal of juror number 13. We think that juror number 13 never demonstrated that he couldn't be fair and impartial. And just because that juror stated that he had an opinion, which was informed by the Holy Spirit but confirmed by the evidence afterwards, that was not a sufficient basis to dismiss him. And I know that's something that might generate some snickers or laughs or so forth, but I think the important issue is this: jurors should be allowed to serve if they are willing to follow the instructions and the law. And my recollection of that hearing is that he said exactly that.
If that juror and Mrs. Brown, I wonder what kind of message you think it sends to the community, the larger community of Jacksonville and your former constituents, that one juror that appeared to be a holdout on this conviction was dismissed. Does that concern you about the message that was sent?
There is a potential message of concern, but that's why we have motions. And so I'm going to work on putting the motions together, and then you'll have a chance to see our arguments fully fleshed out. Right now, obviously, there's a reason why you all are here, because you know that there's an issue with the jurors, and I'm sure all of you are hearing independently, that there's an issue. And let's ultimately put the motions before the court, have the court make the findings of fact, and then make the appropriate ruling.
Congressman, it's been a couple of days now, but your testimony was long and difficult. We've not talked to you since then. Can you talk about testifying in your own defense?
Let me say this. One of the things that you have to know is that ultimately there is a possibility that my client could be sentenced at some point, depending upon the outcome of the motions that we're going to file. So I understand the interest and I understand the questions, but please know, as her lawyer, I can't ask her to talk about what she said in court or to comment on the evidence at all. That would be extreme negligence on my part. And so I understand the desire to ask the questions, but I can't let her answer anything like that.
Well,
a forgiving person, and if you sat through the trial, you could probably see that perhaps the most poignant and heartbreaking point was when she had to talk about Mr. Simmons. She's a Christian, she's a believer, and I don't think the question really should be, will she ever? The question is, has she already? And I can tell you the answer to that is yes.
Can you
Absolutely
tell us that, Congresswoman? I mean, what? You called him your boy.
Let me say this again, because Mr. Simmons has yet to be sentenced, because he played a critical role in this case. I don't want my client to say anything about him at all, but just as she's forgiven people who've done and said all manner of things about her and done things to her, she has forgiven him. And one of the things you might want to take a look at is, if you look at Twitter, some of the incredibly racist and bigoted statements that have been made about her for weeks and still continue to this day. And when I asked my client about it recently, she said, you know what, I just forgive those people because they know not what they do. If she can be that charitable towards them, I'm sure she could be charitable and forgiving towards Mr. Simmons.
Mr. Smith, if Juror 13 had instead said, the Holy Spirit told me Corrine Brown was guilty instead of innocent, would you still feel that he was dismissed improperly?
Well, and that's a good question, and I can understand that question being posed to me. I think the issue is this: if he had said that, however, in addition, said, based upon what I saw in court in the evidence, I came to that conclusion, I'd have no basis for making an argument to the contrary. The test is not what conclusion he reached before the trial, it's what conclusion he reached during the trial, and was that based on the evidence. If it was based on the evidence, then I don't believe, honestly, that he should have been dismissed as a juror. However, the appropriate way for me to bring that up is through a motion, and that's what I'll do.
Congresswoman, can you tell us, we've sort of followed your activities and known what you've been doing for years now, but your job has changed, and so what will you be doing?
Can I tell you this? Again, her job hasn't changed. Her job really hasn't changed, and let me tell you, when she was in Congress, her job was taking care of her constituents. Now that she's no longer in Congress, I can tell you she's still doing that. She's still taking care of her constituents. So the title has changed, but the job hasn't. The mission is still the same, and the dedication is still the same. Here's a woman who last week just got convicted in multiple counts by a federal court, and I guarantee you between that day and today, you could probably find 15 people who've called her for assistance, and she's helped them out. So she may no longer be Congresswoman Corrine Brown, but she's still delivering for a lot of people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
all.
all.
It was so good to be able to talk.
All right, thank you.
And that's the final word.